to the Metal Bob Live podcast. I am your host, Metal Bob. Today's show is brought to you by Legend Picks and also artist Jeremiah Kalleck. You can find links to our sponsors and more at the Metal Bob Live website. There you can also find links to the latest Metal Bob gear, including shirts, hoodies, and more. On today's show, I had the honor of speaking with one of my favorite vocalists, Derek Welsh, of the band McQueen Street. We discussed how McQueen Street became a band. We also talk about the McQueen Street sampler that was mailed out when the band first got signed. And we also talk new music. So sit back, have a listen, and enjoy the show. Thank you. Hello, Derek.
Hey, is this Bob?
It is, buddy. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Really good, man. Appreciate your time.
No, glad to do it. You know, I'm always up for talking, and someone who's got a good show and is in the business and does it. It's what it's all about.
Right on. So hey, man, my first question for you though was, could you give everybody a little rundown on how McQueen Street became a band?
Oh Lord, well it's somewhat of a lengthy story, but I'm going to give you the short end of it. I think that as kids, we all grew up around music. My dad was, early on, he was a musician. And so I always had musicians, around the house and practicing and whatnot. And just, was just a huge fan of music from a really early age. And so was my brother. I went off to college and started really getting into, playing live. That was kind of a big thing my freshman year. And I went to school at Auburn in Alabama, and my roommate was, he was a keyboard player / sort of guitar player, and we ended up, starting a band in college. It was kind of a bit of a, I suppose it was ridiculous at the time, but we thought we were good. And, so that's how I first got into it. And then as things progressed, started, playing a lot of cover music all over the Southeast, a lot of college gigs, bar gigs, kind of the same thing that every, decent musician does. And then after, I think maybe, one or two different cover bands, we started talking about, we really need to do something different, something that, that's got its own thing, its own sound. And at that time, the big thing was Hollywood, LA, that whole LA strip thing. I think Guns N' Roses had just broken around that time. Motley Crue, all those bands were young bands way back then, and so that's kind of the era that we really started writing and working at it. And for it seems like 2-3 years, we really grinded hard to try to make that work. And we were kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not like there was a rock scene in this, in Montgomery, that's for sure. But we, kept on, and we finally went to New York City and did a demo. Who a guy that was really a skilled engineer, a kid I grew up with. He kind of took us under his wing and recorded the demo, and then from there, we started shopping it to different labels. And that's really how we got into it. I mean, that's a very short story, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Oh, that's great. And I remember, because I remember being over at a friend's house, and he went out and checked the mail, and he came inside, and he's like, dude, have you heard of these guys? And he hands me this little cassette tape, because I know when you guys first got signed, they were sending this sample out with My Religion on it. I don't know if you remember that. They were throwing them in the mailboxes.
Of course. Yes.
And I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know. We popped it in, and I'm just like, holy shit, man. I said, turn that up. But that bass in the beginning of My Religion just blew the doors off the place. I was just like,
I
was
know.
hooked. I was hooked, man. I was like, good Lord. So then, of course, I had to run out and get the CD, and that's kind of how I was first introduced to you guys.
That's interesting because it was many years ago, but it also seems like it was just yesterday. I mean, I completely remember all of that stuff, and I remember that the sampler, and it's funny because we have a sampler CD, that we sell, and it is literally the sampler, which was, My Religion. Trying to think of what else was on that. If it seems like there was one of the ballads may have been on that. I can't remember. But it's a 3-song sampler.
Right.
And that's probably the same thing that you got.
Right. It was. I think I do remember there being a couple of songs on there. I think maybe Only the Wind maybe might have been one of them. Or Time.
Right.
Maybe Time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably Time. Time was, the first song that people ever heard was My Religion, because that we kind of got our break on Headbangers Ball on MTV. And, we had recorded the album, and we literally had finished it around like January 1. And it took forever for it to come out. They kept saying, it'll be out next month, and it was like the end of the summer, maybe August or something. And I was like in the shower. And of course I always had MTV on, waiting to see if anything would ever happen. And then, I heard the intro, cow, and I knew it was My Religion, because of course I ran out of there, and there we were. And, it was just, that was kind of the beginning.
Right. Yeah. When I listen to that CD, which I do quite frequently still, but it's just like that song, man, you just got to crank that thing, because
I know.
It was recorded to be loud, man. That song was.
It was. And a lot of people may or may not know this, but when after we had gotten signed, when we talked about we're going to record the album, finding a producer was like a really big thing. And we, I was always a fan of Steve Stevens, who was the guitar player for Billy Idol.
Right.
And everybody knows him, because he had the big giant black hair, and, him and then Billy Idol was on, the opposite end of the spectrum, with his spiky blonde hair. But Steve heard about the band, I think from our A&R rep, and heard our demo and said, hey, I'd like to write with Derek. So I literally flew to New York City. I'd never met Steve. I knock on his door at his apartment, and, I was like, it was weird, but it was great. We sat down and we wrote that song, Two Worlds, which is one of the tracks on the first McQueen Street. And Steve wanted to produce the band. And we went to Atlanta and recorded 3 songs. And, things were going really good. And then, then other producers started, coming around and having an interest. And we ended up going with Tom Werman, who was, huge. I mean, he did Cheap Trick, Ted Nugent, L.A. Guns, Motley Crue, Poison. I mean, just like everybody. So Tom is, that all that backwards talking that's at the beginning of My Religion.
Right.
That's, I kept getting these letters that I was a Satanist, and that, I was going to rot in the pits of hell for all that black magic I was talking about. It was Tom Werman talking, and he reversed it. But it was like, hey, kids, make sure you go to school. Abide by your parents' rules. Don't break the law. All this good kind of stuff. But he turned it backwards, and it sounds evil.
Right.
It's pretty unbelievable. But Tom, was a great producer, and he, he did the whole record. It was really a good thing that it was kind of a win-win. I mean, he was such a great producer, and we were a young, hungry band. It just kind of worked.
Right. How was it working with Steve Stevens?
Really good. I enjoyed it for multiple reasons. When I was in a cover band, my big song that I would cover and play lead guitar on was White Wedding. And so I was kind of in awe of Steve anyway as a guitar player, but he was really cool. He was funny, like very normal, like just a badass guitar player though. I mean, and he's not a big guy. He's like short, but man, his sound and his technique is just through the roof good. I mean, he's such a phenomenal player. So I liked it. I found him to be pretty creative, always pretty upbeat, always. I don't think he tried to be funny, but he was. He was one of those guys. So it was definitely a big plus in my career to work with him.
Absolutely. So, I was going to ask you, so I know it was like 12 years later, and then you guys you had finally gotten the rights. I think you had to fight for the rights to some of these songs so you could release that second record. Is that correct?
Yes, but I think the Beastie Boys had a pretty good hit with "Fight for Your Right." that was our own "Fight for Your Right," But yeah, I mean, it was a long process. Many changes had happened with music, and right around the time we were doing the second album, there was a big, every band was getting dropped. Rock was out, Nirvana had come in. I remember during McQueen Street 1 era, we were touring like all these radio stations, and we got in a limo, and the head rep said, "Hey guys, I want you to listen to this and give me your opinion." And so I'm in, of course, in the back seat with the other guys, and this song starts, I was like thinking to myself, God, man, this is no good, And she said after the song finished, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, the rest of the band said, these guys suck." And I just said, "Well, I can't see this going anywhere." And of course it was, boy, was I wrong. "Smells Like Teen Spirit." I mean, that changed everything. So, anyway, going back to what I was saying, the getting to the point of that second album and getting it out there and fighting, for all the rights and all that stuff, it seemed like a long, hard process, really. But to finally have it out and, the work that went into it was pretty big. And, I'm always going to walk away proud of that album.
Oh, it's a great album. Was any of those songs leftovers from the first album, or were they all new songs for the second record?
Everything was new.
Was it?
Everything.
So
and that, it's a pretty dark, heavy, angry album, I would say. That's kind of the, there's, obviously there's, some ballads in there and things like that, but it's, it's all stuff that really kind of the stuff that I was going through. I mean, I wrote that entire album. I'd rented a beach house, like in the middle of the winter. I think it was in, maybe the panhandle of Florida, or I'm pretty sure it was Florida. It was like a middle of the nowhere little beach house. And I literally just stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks and wrote that whole album.
Nice.
And that's all stuff, that was whatever, either going through my head or, if I came up with a riff, I'd lay it down the next day. I had a little, 8-track digital recorder and a drum machine and, whatever, a bass and a guitar, and, make roughs of all the songs. And then, came back and we worked the things out with the band. So It was, it was a lot went into it. And I definitely love that album. I think that sonic journey that we went on for that album was, it's right up my alley.
Oh, it's a great record. Yeah. I just remember, I knew that there was another album out there, but obviously I knew it never got released. And then one day it just popped up. I don't know if I was on eBay or whatever. I was doing something and it just came up and I was like, oh shit. And then I ordered one and I just like, it was just amazing.
Well, I very much appreciate it. And, it's just, it's always good to hear, what how people liked it or what they thought, or, you know, I've never gotten tired of talking to people about music. I just, you know, it's never gotten boring to me. There's always, you can learn something from pretty much anybody that is either A, in the music business, or B, is a big fan of music. They always have their own angle and their own story. So I always like to hear that.
Yeah, you guys had me from the sampler, man. I was hooked. So,
and listen, and you gotta love that, because it's funny, you know, when you or I say cassette, we know exactly what a cassette is.
Exactly.
Say cassette to some kid these days, they don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
I mean, it's like they're like, what? And then they'll say, what do you mean cassette? I'll say, you know, like an 8-track. And then they'll really look at me like, what? I'm like, you know, but I mean, that's where it all came from. You know,
exactly.
People are like, you know, they're talking about their, you know, I got this, you know, and then I got the latest, you know, MP3 player, or, you know, and that's almost become irrelevant, you know.
It is, yeah.
You know, streaming is, I mean, everything's, you know, technology has moved things in so many ways, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about music. I mean, that's what it all comes back to, and that's, you know, however many different directions, you know, fans go in, or radio goes in, or streaming goes in, it doesn't matter. If the music is there, if the song is there, the band has the right attitude and has captured that moment on vinyl or whatever you want to call it, then that's the kicker. That's the thing that really is what matters.
Exactly. I agree 100%.
So good. We're on the same page.
Yes, sir. Well, Derek, tell me a little bit about some of your solo stuff. I know you got some solo songs out. You do some of your you do some acoustic stuff, or?
Yeah. Well, you know, I've done a lot of different stuff over the years, you know, and I've done, after the touring with McQueen Street in the early days, you know, I took a lot of years off, but I always kept on writing. I've played solo a ton, like me and a guitar, me and a piano, you know, and I've covered everything from, Zeppelin to Bob Dylan to Elton John, you know, Queen. I mean, every kind of thing. But even though I've written that much stuff, I only recorded really one bona fide solo record, which I put out in, I think it was 2011, maybe 2012, 2011, I think it was. It was kind of southern. I call it like a southern rock sort of thing. I was spending a lot of time in Nashville, and I was. I don't know if you remember the country guy Wayne Mills. Okay. That he was the guy that got murdered in a nightclub. Country guy. This was, it's been about, I'm thinking 7 years, maybe 8 years ago. But Wayne I knew him, you know, from way back in the day, and he had asked me to come and do his songwriter show called Alabama Line. And I started doing that and kind of got back into music, doing live a lot. And it was just, you know, me and the guitar. And I did that, you know, every Tuesday or Wednesday night, whatever the nights were. I'd drive 3 hours to Nashville. And I, at the time, recorded a record, you know, and of course I was slaying it country, well, because I was involved with a bunch of country musicians, even though I don't think I could convince anyone that I'm country. Yeah, it is what it is. But, you know, there were songs like Hell of a Saturday Night, Bad Water, pretty rockin', I would call it Southern rock. And I did it, you know, because I was enjoying writing and I was enjoying kind of stepping outside my normal bounds. But that album came out, like I said, in 2011, and I think you can find it probably on some of the streaming services. You know, I've never really pushed it, but you know, I've done a lot of stuff solo. I don't want to say that that's my forte, because I prefer being, you know, a rock guy. You know, hand me a microphone or give me a Les Paul with a cranked up amp, and I'm happy.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm that guy. The louder, the better.
So that brings me to my next question, man. Is there ever a chance for another McQueen Street record?
Well, absolutely. In fact, it's in the works.
Oh, really?
Yes, and if you haven't heard already, and there would be no way for you to know all this unless you happen to follow the page or something. But there's a tune that no one has ever heard called "Outside In." Did you hear that track?
I have not.
Okay, check it out. And anybody that's listening, it's called "Outside In," and you can hear any of this stuff, but you can go to the McQueen Street site, which is McQueenStreet.com, and on there I think we have a link. I think it says listen, but it's got every single streaming service a link to it, and it's got access to everything that we have out there as of right now. But going back to your initial question was, is there ever going to be a record? Yes, definitely. And I'm working literally. I try to work on it, weekly in between other things that I'm doing, writing and getting those songs ready. And then hopefully, and I hate to put an exact time frame, but I don't think 3, 4, 5, 6 months up the road would be out of the question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm surprised I missed that. I don't miss too much stuff, so that one got by me.
I know, but listen, we all got so much going on. You've got your show, you've got your life, and if we all, I can't read everything that comes across, the screen. I mean, so check it out. If you can't, for some reason, find it, I'll just send you a direct link.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's hard rock, and it is how can I put this in a nice way? It's kind of the big middle finger to the corrupt parts of the record industry. That's kind of what it is.
That sounds good to me.
It's like, I figured it would. But, literally, that's kind of like more or less what we all have gone through if you've been in a rock band, and you went through all the changes of the labels and the whole corporate thing, and, everybody wants you to do what the other guy's doing, and, that there's so many stories. Any musician you talk to is going to probably could probably write a book or two on all the ridiculous things. But, that's knowing that when you hear the song, they'll go, oh yeah, now I get it.
Right on. Yep. I'm going to have to check that out. So,
good deal.
Is there anything else that you'd like to promote at this time, or tell people where they can find you online? The McQueen Street Facebook page is a good way to, kind of keep up with things. Send a friend request. I mean, we go through that stuff, daily and try to keep up with people. The McQueenStreet.com website is good. You can do a lot of search, literally just get on Google and search, McQueen Street. You can search my name, Derek Welsh, and find different things. But honestly, the best way to keep up with, I'll call it day-to-day issues, is probably through the Facebook page. I mean, that's always pretty up to date and kind of can, when there's a song, it could be anything from a recently recorded track to like me sitting on an acoustic playing part of, Only the Wind or Time or, whatever. But I personally try to keep people abreast of what's going on, especially after all these years, it's because just like you're telling me, man, I remember the day that I got the sampler. We're all fans of the music in some way, me included. And that's probably the best way. You can get on the McQueen Street site. You can get any of the records, T-shirts. There's like, I don't even know, 4, 5, 6 different shirts that are out, and you'll know
when there's a new song or a new single coming up, you'll be the first to hear about it.
That's great to know, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking, and you know, you've asked good questions and things that are, you know, I think relevant to anybody that likes, you know, music, especially rock. I mean, it all, you know, I didn't even ask you, what state are you in?
I'm in Missouri.
Missouri, all right.
Yep.
Hell, wait a minute. What rock band is from Missouri?
Ooh.
Kansas City?
Yeah, there's a couple up there from Kansas City. I'm trying to. I haven't been here very long. I'm actually originally from Illinois. I've been here a couple years.
Okay.
But I do know
Wow.
there's a couple bands from around.
Is it Puddle of Mud from Missouri?
They might be. That
I
might.
think they're from. And my son was telling me. And anyway, watch the Puddle of Mud videos. She Hates Me.
Okay.
That is a McQueen Street shirt that the singer Wes Scantlin is wearing.
Okay.
Why do I know this? Because I was sitting at home one night and my friend calls me up. Hey, dude, are you watching MTV? I said no. He said you might want to turn it on. I'm like, why? Just turn it on. That's what he said. And damn if the guy isn't wearing a McQueen Street shirt. And on the back of it, it says "Stick It," which is one of the tracks off the first album.
That's great.
I know. Puddle of Mud. Crazy. But I think my son told me they were from Missouri.
Yeah, you might be right. I had to look that up to be sure, but you might be right about that.
Is Kansas City, Missouri? Is that the same city in Missouri?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's got to be where they're from.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, there you go. That was a non-asked answer to a non-asked question that you got an answer to.
There you go.
Anyway, but yeah, man, you know, again, I appreciate you talking to me and supporting the music, and you know, this is like the number one best way to, you know, get the word out there.
No, man, I really appreciate your time, Derek, man. It's really good to talk to you, man, and I'd like to have you back on again when that new record comes out, if that'd be all right with you.
Anytime, Bob. Anytime, I'm up for it. You know, shoot me a message, whatever. You've got my phone number. Call me, send me a text. I try to answer everything, and usually I pick up the phone, and, you know, it sounds like you know what you're doing, which is, you know, not sometimes, always a breath of fresh air. We'll leave it at that.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Well, brother, you have a good rest of your night, man, and we'll hope to talk to you soon. That concludes today's episode of the Metal Bob Live podcast. Please check our webpage for sponsor links and the latest Metal Bob gear. Thank you for listening. Metal Bob out.